How to fix a peeling epoxy floor. Welcome back. It's been a while since I brought out a new video, but I think this is a really good subject we can talk about today. A very important subject, like you see in this picture. I want to start by making a very important statement that before we try to fix a peeling floor and how we can fix it, the real issue is to understand why it's peeling, because if you don't know why it's peeling, there's no point in fixing it. And I'm going to leave you with this quote: fixing a peeling floor is often more expensive than doing it the first time around. This is a very important point. I'm going to mention it again. I'm going to give some more examples later. But let's get started, and I'm going to show you a few pictures of floors that were peeling and why they needed fixing. Now here in this case, this was a floor that someone at some point had done a very thin epoxy paint. It was obviously not enough for a heavy duty floor in foods and drinks. So we came in here, we had to basically remove the whole existing paint, the epoxy paint, and recoat from the start and put in a proper epoxy coat, much thicker this time, so it could stand the test of time. This is another classic example from a car park. The person who put this floor in had never bothered to properly prep the surface underneath. No primer, and the coating started peeling almost immediately. In this case here is whoever applied this paint didn't do a very good job of preparing the surface, priming it. So he got all these blisters and little chipped paint. He hadn't bothered preparing the underneath surface. This example is a bit more complicated. I have an entire video on it. I'm going to post a link to that video. This was an epoxy applied on a rough concrete, and when the concrete just wasn't strong enough, it broke. And before I show you the last picture, please subscribe to our channel if you haven't subscribed already. It's very important that you subscribe because it helps us. It helps YouTube recommend our videos, and then we can keep on producing more videos and bringing out more content. So please subscribe if you haven't already. And in this final example, in this case, the floor was alright, but we only had some localized peeling around the drainage, where the water just kept on peeling here locally. The epoxy kept on peeling locally because the water got into the coating and just kind of the humidity underneath just pushed the coating out. So this is a localized problem, and I want to start with a very important question when we are about to fix a peeling floor. Do we remove the entire floor and just recoat the whole thing, or do we do local patch jobs? Do we just kind of go locally and patch them up? And the reason why this is so important is that a lot of times you have customers who say, hey, I just want you to patch up the 10 areas that are problematic. The problem is, if the whole floor is problematic, there's no point in just patching a few things, because if you try coating over this, there's a reason why the floor is failing, and applying epoxy on top is not going to fix it. So we look at the various approaches now. The first approach is total removal. As in this case, this was a worn out olive factory, and we had to remove it. In some cases we use machines like the scarifier you see in this picture, but sometimes the best way to remove is, if you don't use a machine like a grinder or a scarifier, sometimes you just have to go locally with a spatula and just chip off the epoxy. It is a lengthy process, it is a dirty process, but sometimes it's the only way. So expect a lengthy process. If your floor is all over problematic, it's the only way you can really fix the problem. And another important point is, make sure that whatever you then decide to apply on top of this floor, it will work and it will not fail again. So make sure you have understood why it failed in the first place so you can actually fix it. One final point about total removal, and this is, I once had a customer who had a floor in pretty good shape, and he only had like one little problem in one area, and it had probably been caused due to some sort of contamination or some sort of humidity. And the customer was convinced that he wanted to strip out the entire floor and redo it. And I told him there was no reason, because the problem was localized. In the end, we got into an argument, and I did not take on the project, because I realized that customer, he just kind of seemed to think that every time there's a problem, you just strip out the whole floor. You strip out the whole floor if the floor seems to have a general problem. If the problem is localized and you can isolate it, then you don't really want to be tampering with the floor and damaging the entire substrate just to strip it out. I mentioned this at the start. I'm going to repeat this quote. Fixing a peeling floor is more expensive than starting it from scratch. And the reason why I want to mention this is because, as I showed you in this previous picture, I sometimes go to a project where someone went before me, did the floor 2 months later is peeling, and they call me to fix it. And then I give them a number to fix it. And they say, wait a minute, I paid $5,000 to make this floor, and you want $8,000 to fix it? And I say yes, because now I have to remove the old paint and recoat in a proper way and not what you put in. They kind of think, many customers think that if it costs $5,000 to make, a fix can cost $1,000. That's not usually the case. If you have to remove a floor, it will be more expensive than doing it from scratch. Very, very important point. And now let's move on to patching jobs. So one option is to do a total removal. In this case, like in this picture, this was a floor that was fine, but in one corner, a pipe had burst and had caused some humidity underneath the coat. So they asked us to locally fix this small area, which is maybe like 30 by 30 centimeters. So what we did here was we broke it up, we broke up the chipping epoxy, we filled the area up, we did some sanding, and we did a final top coat on top, just that area. This approach works if the problem is localized. So in our case, it was a local area where some damage had been done to the floor and we could fix it and isolate it. If this had been a widespread problem, this wouldn't work. You would fix one area and then a week later another problem emerges. So these patch jobs are only useful if the problem is localized. Another important point about patch jobs is all patching work is visible. So after fixing this and recoating, and even if I use the same type of epoxy and the same color epoxy, even the same batch of epoxy, there will always be a slight difference in the color. This is very, very important. Do not assume that you can magically make the entire epoxy, the patch job, disappear. It will always be visible. If you have a small room, sometimes it's better to recoat just the entire room rather than trying to isolate specific areas. Whatever you do, just make it clear the customer understands. Fixing a problem is not as simple as show up with a paintbrush and just blotch a bit of paint. It's a bit more complicated than that. Next option we have is to recoat over old epoxy. Now, this example here is there was an old floor visible. The problem with the old floor was it had gotten dirty. In several areas, we'd seen some cracks in the floor, and a few areas had chipped, but overall it was in good condition. There was no indication that this floor was going to fail or the whole thing needed removing. So what we did here was we showed up, we gave it a little grind, we patched up some of the cracks, we gave it a good priming over, and then we recoated the floor to make it look new. So this works as long as you do not have any evidence of generalized peeling. If you see that most of the floor is peeling, or there's a tendency for the floor to peel, and you can see that by just taking a spatula and seeing if the paint easily removes, then you don't really want to coat over, because you will always have a loose layer underneath that hasn't stuck properly to the concrete. So you only do this if you are absolutely sure that the underneath layer is in good condition. Important point is, if you are going to follow this approach, you need to do your sanding and your grouting and your patch jobs first. Don't just assume that you just go in there and you just paint over it. It also requires some preparation. Now, I gave you a general picture of what to do when you should strip out the floor and recoat, or when you can just do isolated patching jobs. If you want to learn more about recoating and removal of coatings and which machines are the best to remove your coatings and how to go about, well, all of this is covered in our online course. We have recently relaunched our online course in 2021. Our new course contains way more videos, way more information. We have new pictures from all the projects we have completed in the past few years, where we kind of approach how to apply epoxies, how to troubleshoot, how to fix failing floors. There's lots and lots of information. So definitely check out our online course. I'm going to post a link in the comments below in the in the comments and in the description of the video below, so you can, whenever you want to, you can just click on the link and find out more about our online course. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and like our video, and there's lots of other videos you can watch. So thank you very much. See you soon.